light at the end of the tunnel. Finally, the question really is, how strongly will it recover? We saw 330,000 international visitors last year versus 19 million pre-pandemic. So how quickly will we get there?
Well, our central scenario is that we will still take a few more years to get back to pre-COVID levels of tourism. Major markets like China, Japan are still relatively closed. Even for the markets that are open, there's still a certain degree of caution amongst travelers. So we don't expect a very, very strong recovery over the next 1 or 2 years. We still expect tourism to recover to pre-COVID levels only from the mid-2020s onwards.
Give us a sense of the numbers you're expecting for the year, Keith, and for 2023.
It's too early to make any predictions and forecasts for 2022 and 2023 so far, but we've seen very encouraging numbers from the first 3 months of the year. 57,000 in January, 67,000 in February, and about 120,000 in March. And this was before we announced the full reopening of our borders and the movement to a vaccinated travel framework. So I'm quite optimistic that demand will come back quite strongly, and this will be a boost to our aviation and tourism sectors.
You talked about China. How big a hit are you getting from China? China accounts for about 12 to 15% of international arrivals here in the Lion City. Given that it remains shut, what kind of a hit are you looking at?
Well, we know that we have to discount China from any forecasts for 2022 and a very moderate number, even at best, in 2023. So that's a major impact on us. And therefore, we are pushing as hard as we can to grow arrivals and travel from regional markets here in Southeast Asia, but also Australia, India. These were important markets to us, and we have to double down on our efforts to bring visitors back, including visitors from these countries who would have gone to China, who would have gone to Japan previously, or maybe even further afield to Europe, but now maybe a bit more cautious to travel to Europe or can't go to China or Japan. Can they come to Singapore? And we want to bring them here instead.
Keith, how about bringing back laborers, workers in the tourism industry? Because we continue to hear about shortages, and of course we know that part has also been challenging. When will you actually start to focus on this?
This is a major preoccupation for us right now because we see the very strong positive signals on the demand side, and that's why now we are focusing a lot on the supply side. We know that through the pandemic, the tourism sector lost about a third of its workforce. Many were foreign workers who went back to their home countries in the region and to China, and some will not come back. And now we are doubling our efforts to bring locals into the tourism sector, as well as now that we have reopened our borders to most countries, including important source countries such as Malaysia, we want to build back that pipeline of workers supporting the tourism sector.
Keith, F1 is always a big highlight and a great time to be in Singapore. What are your expectations for visitor numbers, and are there going to be live concerts and events back this year?
We are planning as much as we can for an event that looks as much as 2019. That is our intention. We're still working through the detailed health safety protocols with our colleagues from the other government agencies, but the central scenario is that things will be almost like as if they were back to normal. The early signs from companies, from corporates, from travel agents, our travel partners around the world are very encouraging, and I expect to see a very, very packed and vibrant F1 event here in Singapore later this year.
Keith, you talk about doubling down on efforts to get international travelers who would have gone to China and other parts of the world to the Lion City. There are plans for snowboarding here in tropical Lion City. Surely you need to do more than that to attract those tourists.
Well, our strategies are focused in two main areas. Number one, first of all, in the short term, let's make it as easy as possible for people to come to Singapore. So removing many of the requirements, many of the regulations, making the requirements as discoverable and easy to follow as possible. So that's number one. And for those of us who have traveled overseas so far, you know that it gets challenging having to navigate the different requirements going to different countries. So number one priority is make it as easy as possible for travelers to come into Singapore. Then number two, we have to give them a reason to come to Singapore, right? So that strategy hinges on having a vibrant calendar of events, both business and leisure events like F1, but there are many other events that are in the pipeline. I've mentioned Avatar, the experience, which will happen at Gardens by the Bay later this year as well, and a very, very rich calendar of big MICE and business events happening this year. So that's one part of the reason why we want to give, why people would want to come to Singapore. But then secondly, also the hardware, right? The attractions, the hotels, and they have not been sitting still over the last 2 years, reinventing themselves, refreshing themselves, creating new products, new experiences, including the possibility of snowboarding right off Orchard Road.
Keith, before I let you go, Cruise to Nowhere was the focus of the tourism sector pretty much to help Singaporeans and also those around the region to perhaps leave the city. What's the outlook for the cruise industry? When will we get to pre-pandemic? I mean, it was important in terms of tourism receipts.
Well, many Singaporeans have enjoyed cruises to nowhere, including myself, and I had a great time on the cruises. And we see from other countries that cruise demand has come back with a vengeance in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, and we expect the same patterns here in Singapore as well. We are now working very closely to expand the number of cruise lines coming to Singapore. There's strong interest from major cruise lines. At the same time, we are also working with our regional partners, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, so that we can reopen cruises to somewhere later this year.